to eVent Virginia Tech. So bring all aspiring entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs together and create businesses, collaborate. We have all the resources you need. We have lawyers. We have alumni that are entrepreneurs right now, and we have CEOs that are sponsors that you can network with. Most of all, we have the VT5K business competition. Basically, that's a competition where you could submit a 1 to 2 page business summary into one of 5 categories, and those business summaries are evaluated by investors in the 460 Angels group. Bob is not here today, but he is the leader of that group, and they pick the winners, and the winners receive $1,000 to go towards their business. They also receive 4 months of office space in TechPad. So without further ado, Caroline can introduce Cameron.
So our speaker today started out as a young businessman when he was only 9 years old. By the age of 12, he had multiple more companies. In his teens, his then company was generating $15,000 in revenue every day. He became the youngest American appointed to a Tokyo-based company and published his own book called 15-Year-Old CEO, all in 1 year. He did all this and also made his first million all before his senior prom. Today, I'm not introducing any regular speaker. I am introducing a man only 26 who has already accomplished so much. Welcome successful entrepreneur, author, and speaker, Cameron Johnson.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. It's good to be back in Blacksburg.
Yeah, so you've had a little history in Blacksburg, right?
I did. I went to school here, and then when I left school for business reasons, I bought a house and lived here for 3 years.
Okay, so how long were you in school here?
I was here for a year.
So only a freshman at Virginia Tech, and then he went off and did all this crazy stuff, right? So let's start out in the very beginning. So when you were 9, you had your first business.
Yep.
And to me, that's like, how does a 9-year-old even think about business? I was thinking about the playground, thinking about ice cream. How does a 9-year-old become motivated and interested in business?
So when you think about it, Girl Scouts are already selling cookies. Boy Scouts sell popcorn. Most elementary or middle schools have some kind of fundraiser selling, wrapping paper or whatever the case. So, I think young people have some ability of sales or entrepreneurship in them to begin with.
Right.
Whether it's trying to get more allowance or whether it's trying to go to, the movies and your parents are saying, get an A on this test and then I'll give you an extra $10, whatever the case. So for me, my first business was when I had a computer and a printer, and I printed these invitations and I showed them to my mom, and she said, well, that's great. You can print the invitations to a party that your dad and I are having. Mm-hmm. And I just said, sure, if you pay me. And that's literally how I got my first sale. And then after that, I got more sales from the people that came to the party and neighbors and relatives. And then had a newspaper article in the Reading Times when I was 9, and then that just generated more business. So I didn't necessarily sit down and write out a business plan and say, the paper is going to cost this much and the ink cartridges are going to cost this much, and this is how I'm going to start my business.
Right.
I sort of just had that first sale and then went from there.
Okay. Because I think a lot of people, especially people were asking me too, they said there's no way a 9-year-old didn't have any help. The logistics behind having a business is tough, even for 20-whatever-year-olds. So did you have any help from parents, or how did that all come about?
Well, to them, it wasn't necessarily, a business. It was just, okay, I'm selling them invitations. Now somebody wants a letterhead, so I'm selling somebody a letterhead. It was anything that I could do with my computer and my printer. It wasn't something, when you say, start a business, people think like, oh my gosh, he's opening a coffee shop, and you've got to have staff, and you've got to have utility bills, and you've got to have all these responsibilities that you don't have when you're a one-man or one-kid operation.
Right.
So my parents, still to this day, know nothing about computers and technology, and they can barely, email. I think, they can use the reply button, but I don't think they can, actually start a message themselves.
Right.
So my parents never used computers in their work, and I was the oldest in my family. I have a younger sister, and so I was the first in my family to have a computer and a printer when all of my friends already had them in their households, either because their parents needed them for work or because they had older siblings that were in high school or college. So I always felt like I had catching up to do, and always felt like I had something to prove. And so my first business was obviously a small one, just printing greeting cards and stationery.
Okay. And I know around that age you kind of have an interesting story about Donald Trump, and you have a connection with him.
Yeah.
And you also had a dream about a character that you were kind of aiming to be like from a movie.
So that was actually before I started my first business. I had just seen the movie Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, and Macaulay Culkin's in the film, and he's at this hotel that's called the Plaza Hotel in New York City. And at the time, I was 8 years old. I saw the movie. I didn't know who Donald Trump was, but it turns out he obviously was a successful businessman, and he owned the hotel. And he has a cameo in the film where he comes down and he greets Macaulay Culkin. And after the movie, I was like, does that guy really own that hotel? And I'd never been to New York City, and I was never afraid to ask for something. So, I mean, I think to be successful in sales, you've got to be willing to ask for the sale. So it's just like when I printed these invitations, I said, sure, if you pay me. What's in it for me? So what I did after I saw the movie was I begged my parents, I want to go to New York City. I'll do anything in the world, whatever we have to do. I grew up in Roanoke, so it's an hour-and-a-half flight. What do we have to do to go to New York City? And so my parents always believed that, traveling is a great education. And so when my dad would travel for work, he would often take me even when, I was 5 or 6 years old and didn't even know necessarily where I was or what I was learning.
Right.
So my parents finally agreed, and they said, if you get straight A's this whole school year, then we'll take you to New York City next summer. So it was the 4th grade, and back then I could get straight A's. And that might have been the last time I got straight A's. So when I brought home the report card at the end of that school year, I said, Mom, look, I got straight A's. Guess what? We're going to New York City. And they said, yep, we're going to New York City. So then I said, well, can we stay at the Plaza Hotel? The hotel is in the movie. If you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. So they made a deal with me or whatever, and they said, yes, we'll stay at the Plaza Hotel. And so when I found out that we were going to be staying at the Plaza, and I knew that Donald Trump owned it, and I was 8 years old, I sat down with a piece of notebook paper, and I just said, Dear Mr. Trump, my name's Cameron Johnson, I'm 8 years old, I'm from Roanoke, Virginia. You obviously don't know who I am, but I am going to be staying at your hotel. I just got straight A's. I'm coming to New York for the first time. The only thing I want to do while I'm in New York City is I want to see the suite where Macaulay Culkin filmed the movie. So I just want to open the door and be like, wow, that's it, okay? It's something very cool to be an 8-year-old, and that's just what I wanted. So I never asked my mom for help. I never told her that I was writing this letter. I never told any of my friends at school, because if you're in the 4th grade and you're like, hey, I just wrote a letter to Donald Trump, every day they're going to say, so have you heard back? Have you heard back? All my businesses were something that I kept very close to my chest. And so I never told anyone I wrote this letter. I put it in an envelope. Then I realized, and this was before I even had a computer, so I didn't have Donald Trump's address. So the only thing I wrote on the envelope was Donald Trump, The Plaza Hotel, New York City. I didn't even put like a zip code or NY for the state. I guess we hadn't gotten to that yet in 4th grade. So I just mailed it, New York City, the Plaza, Donald Trump. It was like writing to Santa Claus. I never knew if he was going to get it. And I put it out, after my mom had already put out the mail for the day, so nobody saw this envelope. I was positive of it. Right. And to my disappointment, I never heard back. But I never told anyone, so what do I have to be ashamed of? Maybe it got lost in the mail. When we get to the hotel and my mom gives the receptionist her name to check in, the receptionist immediately leans over the counter and she says, you must be Cameron. And now my mom's like, what in the hell is going on? And before my parents can say anything or react, I immediately knew what was going on. And the next words out of her mouth were, Mr. Trump received your letter. Now my parents are even more confused. And he understands you want to see the suite where Home Alone 2 was filmed. Now my parents are laughing. And Mr. Trump's actually arranged for you to stay in the suite the whole time you're here. So he did that only because I wrote to him, and obviously nobody was staying in it, or I wouldn't have had it. But he did that only because I wrote to him and I asked for it. And he also gave me a private tour of FEO Schwartz, the toy store across the street, before it opened. And he knew I liked the movie, so he got me a Talkboy recorder like the one Macaulay Culkin used in the movie. And he did all these things simply because I asked for it. And so, the lesson I took away from that is anything you want, whether that's the job,